Teach you now. Okay, welcome to this first in a series of live streams where I'm going to try and teach you how to program in Java. We're going to go through a series of videos, starting off with this one here, which is variables and outputs, where we're going to look at variables, data types, how we hold that kind of information, how we output information, then how we would input it, how we're going to do some basic arithmetic, including the use of div and mod, how we use if, else, if, and else statements, so selection statements, logical comparisons, for loops, and while loops. And when we get to the end of the road of this first stage, we've kind of learnt the basics of sequence, selection, and iteration. To kick us off, we're going to be making use of an IDE called Netbeans. Your Netbeans, when you open it, will look something like this. And it's an IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment. And this is where you can have some debugging work for you. You can also be able to run the code, compile the code. It's all under one package. And so we're going to make our first program. I'm going to go to, whoops, my bad. I'm going to go to File, New Project, and Java application I want to select. I'll go Next, and I'll go Java Tutorial 1. Now you may have noticed I haven't used any spaces, and that's quite deliberate. I put it all together, and for the very first word for each, the very first letter for each word, I've capitalized as called camel case. At the bottom, I kept selected create main class. You want to have that selected yourself, and then I'll go finish. And now in the background, it's going to be creating all the folders or the structure to hold all this information together. And you can see here, I've got Java Tutorial 1, and I've got this folder here, and then inside it I've got my first file called Java Tutorial 1. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to enlarge that so we can see it a little bit easier. Fantastic. This bit here, where we've got / and asterisk, that's all comments, so we don't need that. I'm just going to delete it. This here at the top called package, well, if you're writing any kind of size of program, the chances are you're going to have a bunch of different files working together. How do they know they're all related? Well, they're all in the same folder typically, but also they all have this package at the top included. I don't need this comment. Public class Java Tutorial 1. So in Java, the main file that you'll have is something called a class. We'll learn more about that when we do object orientation. But for the moment, just understand the class is like the name of the file. And so we've got this reserved word class, public. I'll just say this. It's about visibility, and it means that other classes can see it. Like I say, you may have multiple classes, and if you make it public, they can view it. And if you make it private, they can't view it. Truthfully, it doesn't really matter at the moment for us. The name of the program is called Java Tutorial 1. I want you to notice this. There's these curly brackets. Now, if you've come from a programming language like Python, for instance, you won't have encountered them so much. So curly brackets, what are they there for? Well, they show scope. They say where the class begins, so there's curly bracket here, and you see it's highlighted another one here, and that's the scope where it ends. In something like Python, you indent to show scope where things begin and end. And if you notice, this is actually indented. Indenting in Java doesn't do scope. What it does is it's there for readability. It makes it easier to see. Then we have this main method here called main. This is where all the starting bit. And they've got a comment here saying this is where the application logic. And I'm not going to go through how all this works. I'm just going to say that this in here is where all our first code is going to go. And the very first thing we wanted to do was variables. So let's do that. Let's think of a first one. In fact, even before variables, why don't we just do the classic first thing that everyone has to do, which is to say hello world. So we're going to have an output command, hello world. Now, again, if you come from something like Python, you're going to be quite annoyed about how involved this is. In Python, you could type something like print and then brackets, and you do hello world. And that would just work perfectly fine for you. As you can see here, because it's an IDE, it's giving you a hint that it's red underlined. It's not happy about that. It's just not going to work because print is not a command that's inside it. Here's the command, and it's a little bit involved, but I'll give you a shortcut in a second. It's system with a capital S, dot, out, so output, dot, print, and then finally it's ln. You might think that's one N. It's ln, short for line, print ln, hello world. Oh, well, I said that that was going to work, did I not? And you can still see it's a red squiggly line. That's because there's another thing that's a convention in most programming languages, but not in Python, which is that you need to say when the line ends. Where's the end of the line? And the way that you indicate that is by putting a semicolon. And now the untidy bit of red squiggly line is gone. We can see if this works. What I can just do is I can right-click on the background here. I can go down to Run File. And then what we'll do is that it will pop up. It will be compiled in the background. It's compiling, and in the bottom, see if I can make that a bit larger for you guys. There you go. It's outputted to the console. Hello world. Fantastic. But we can do more. We can do more. So why in here, instead of just saying hello world, I'm going to introduce my first variable. So I could introduce myself. So maybe if it's me, I have a name, and then equals for assignment, and then Mr. Foster, otherwise known as TLDR. Pleased to meet you. Now, I want you to think for a moment. It's a red squiggly line, and I've already told you one thing that's wrong about this. So have a look at a bit of code. Can you see what the wrong thing is going to be? That's right. At the end of the line, you need a semicolon to say it's finished. And now it's not all red squiggly line. It's just this part. And I'll tell you why. If you've used a programming language called Python, which I dare say a lot of you have, it's what's called a dynamically typed language. Dynamically typed because what happens is that the language sort of infers the data type. So that's a string, and then it infers that that is a string there. Java, and there are many languages like it, are statically data typed. What does that mean? It means you need to state the data type. So before name, we need to state the data type. What's the data type? It's going to be a string, and it's with a capital S like that. So we've said that the data type is string, the variable identifier is name, and the value is Mr. Foster. So in here, why don't I just stick that, make use of my new variable. I've got hello world, comma, and then I'm going to concatenate. That means I'm going to stick the string on, so plus name. So what's going to happen here, hopefully, is it's going to say hello world. It's going to look inside that variable, Mr. Foster, and it's going to stick it on there. And I'm going to run it. Beautiful, there you go. Oh, that doesn't even make sense. Why don't I say Mr. Foster, and then at the end of it, I could say here. Wonderful. Okay, so why don't we have a play around with different data types? We've got strings. Let's think about what some of the other data types we have that we could be using. So we could have integer for whole numbers. We could have double or float for a real number. That'd be a number with a decimal place. We've got char, short for character, so that's a single letter in a string, or it could be, it could be a symbol, could be even a number. We've got Boolean. Let's use all of them. So I'm going to be, what I'm going to say? I'm going to say class size equals 10. Some people are missing. It's not happy with us. Why is it not happy with us? As I was saying, it's a statically typed language, so I need to say what this is. And you might look at string and you'll be like, aha, it's like this, integer. Actually, technically, there is a class called integer, but we're not going to make use of it right now. We're going to type int with a lowercase I. Int is what's referred to as a primitive data type. It's one of the core data types that the system is built on. Do you notice that it's gone blue? Do you notice that string is not blue and it's got a capital S? Because technically a string isn't a primitive data type. You form a string out of something. You form it out of a series of characters. So character is a primitive data type. So we can type in char, short for character. Ooh, what's a suitable thing for this? Maybe I'll say that for me, my char will be wing. So the wing of the school I'm in right now. Equals, now you might be thinking speech marks A, semicolon, But technically, that's not going to quite do what you want it to do, because that is going to give you a string if you've got speech marks. I don't want speech marks. What do I need? Actually, you need quotation marks for a char. So that is just to the right of semicolon for those single quotation marks. What else do I need? I've got car, I've got integer, I've got character, I've got string. A real number or a floating point number. We can use double, so double point accuracy of a floating point. So we've done floating point numbers. And so a float would be a 4-byte version. Double is an 8-byte version, which is probably overkill, but fine. What can we do? What's a good example where I could use a double? How about I use it for room width in meters. So it won't be exactly 5 meters or exactly 8 meters. So let's say it's 8.72. Now, do I put meters at the end? Yeah, absolutely not. In maths, you would have learned to do that, but in this case, you just need the value on its own. Is not happy with me. Why is it not happy with me? Semicolon. Now, something that's pretty neat about Java that's different from something like Python is that you don't need to cast to stick things onto a string. Let me show you what I mean by that. Oh, and I said I was going to give you a tip for systemout.println. Here's my tip. Type SOUT tab. Check that out. So I have a class of, now in something like Python, you'd have to then say plus str class size to convert the class size. In Java, sticking things onto a string converts it instantly to a string. So it's pretty neat. So you just go have a string plus an integer to it, boom, now it's become a string. Neat, right? So I have a class size of 10, and then I got 10. Where was I? And I could say I teach in plus wing wing. Okay, now this is non-ideal because I'm starting to go off on my thing a little bit. So I might come back down. Hopefully that's still easy to read. Maybe one more. There you go. So hopefully it will say I have a class of class size 10 and I teach in plus a wing. Should we try? Again, right click on the background, run file. Fantastic. And then I could also do SOUT tab. My room is, what a random thing to say, plus room width. See, that's the name of my variable. Meet m wide. And again, because of the way Java works, me adding that double, so a real number, to a string instantly casts it as a string and just lets you stick it on. Oh, and I missed one out. Boolean likes rugby. Notice again, much like the name of the class, I cannot use a space in a variable. Variables all need to be one word together like that. And I use camel case. The first letter, again, is capitalized. Boolean, 2 values, true or false. So true. If you didn't like rugby, obviously you're making the wrong choices in life. You know, that's on you. And then I could also stick that on here. Now, so that is the basics. So what have we just covered? I guess we've covered how to create an application. But also what have we done? We've declared some variables. We've looked at the data types. And we've seen that we have to declare the data types as int, char, double, boolean. And we've also shown how we can stick that on, concatenate that to a string. Let me show you something else, though. Let's say that later on, down here, I've actually updated my class size. So now my class size is going to be 12. You might think I go, okay, so it's int class size equals 12. What's the mistake? Aha, semicolon to end it. It's still not happy with me. Well, surely I've done it right. No. when you do the int and then the name of the variable, you're declaring the variable for the first time. So you sort of bring it into existence and you're making a reference to that place. Once I've declared it, so I've declared class size, I never have to say int again. I've already said it's an integer. All right, so every time I want to change it in the future, I just refer the name of it and then change that. So if I want to change which wing the thing is on, I do it like that. D wing is the new room. It's the new wing of the school. So that's something that's important to learn. Okay, I think it's over to you. Let's have a look. We're in this variables and outputs, and I want you to do these first things here. I want you to create a book face profile, no relation to any other social media platform you've heard about. And on there, I want you to store the following data about a user. Their first and last name. So that will be a string. Whether they like cheese. That's a bit random, I know, but inoffensive, which will either be true or false. Their age as an int. The height in meters as a double. And their middle initial. If you haven't got a middle initial, I guess you leave it blank. Then you need to concatenate those together, so that was sticking it onto a string to have one message you're going to give. Then create another 5 variables of your own data type. It's your own decision to make, and then output that. Okay, well, I pause now because this is the thing you need to do. You're welcome to skip back, but this is the end of our first lesson.